"Let your hair down and the job is yours," the CEO said during the interview, but she had no idea of the real reason. "Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story." The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, casting long shadows across the minimalist waiting area of Whitmore and Associates. Maya Miller sat rigidly in a chrome chair that felt deliberately uncomfortable, the kind of furniture designed to test your posture and your patience simultaneously. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, so precise it could have been measured with a protractor. Every strand was in place. Everything about her was in place. She adjusted her navy blazer for the third time in 5 minutes, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. Her resume lay in a folder on her lap, organized with tabs color-coded by project category. 28 years old, 10 years of architecture experience, 7 successful projects, 0 promotions in the last 3 years. Today was supposed to change that. Maya Miller, a young receptionist with an undercut and visible tattoos, smiled apologetically. "Mr. Whitmore is ready for you." Maya stood, straightened her blazer again, and followed the receptionist down a hallway lined with photographs of glass and steel buildings that looked like they'd been designed by someone who believed joy was a structural liability. The office smelled like expensive leather and the faint ghost of ambition. The receptionist knocked twice and opened the door to a corner office that was almost aggressively spotless. Behind an obsidian desk sat James Whitmore, late 30s, dark suit, darker eyes, the kind of handsome that came with a warning label. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. His expression suggested he'd never smiled in his life, or if he had, he'd regretted it immediately. "Ms. Miller." He didn't stand. "Sit." Maya sat. She crossed her legs at a precise 90-degree angle, her hands folded in her lap like she was posing for a corporate portrait. "Tell me about yourself," James said, his eyes scanning her resume without actually looking at it. He already knew everything it contained. He'd read it 4 times. He was stalling. "I've been working in residential and commercial architecture for a decade," Maya began, her voice steady and professional. "My most recent project, the Riverside Lofts development, came in 2.3% under budget and was completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule. I'm detail-oriented, deadline-driven, and I—" "Do you ever have fun?" James interrupted. Maya blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Fun. Recreation. Spontaneity." He leaned back in his chair, which cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Do you ever do anything that isn't scheduled or quantified or optimized for maximum efficiency?" This was an unusual question for an architecture interview. Maya's mind raced through the appropriate response. "I believe that structure and discipline are the foundations of excellence in this field. Fun is a luxury that comes after the work is done correctly." "Right." James stood and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. Below, the city sprawled in grids and patterns, all of it carefully organized, all of it somewhat lifeless. "Our firm has been criticized lately. The Times called us sterile." "Sterile? Do you know what that means?" "Lacking life," Maya offered quietly. "Precisely. We build beautiful things that no one actually wants to be in." He turned back to her. "We're suffering from a creativity crisis, and I believe it's because everyone in this office takes themselves far too seriously. Everyone's a robot. Everyone's a Maya Miller." Mouts, he hadn't meant it as a compliment. "I don't see how my personality affects my architectural capabilities," Maya said carefully. Her hands remained folded. Her bun remained perfect. "That's exactly my point." James returned to his desk and sat down. He steepled his fingers. "Tell me something. How long have you been wearing your hair like that?" "I'm sorry." "Your hair, the bun. How long?" Maya's fingers instinctively touched the back of her head. "Since college. It's professional. It keeps hair out of the way. It's practical. It's armor," James said. "And I think you'd benefit from taking it off." There was a long silence. Maya's face flushed a deep shade of burgundy that clashed beautifully with her navy blazer. "Excuse me? Solte o cabelo," James said, in what was clearly not Portuguese, but definitely not English either. He'd been watching too many Brazilian films. "Loosen up. Be a little less tight." Maya stood, slowly, deliberately. Her chair scraped against the floor with an aggressive sound that seemed to echo through the office. "I appreciate the opportunity to interview Mr. Whitmore, but I don't think this is the right fit for either of us. Good luck finding someone more relaxed." She turned toward the door. "Wait." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I'm offering you the position," James said quietly. Maya turned back slowly. "I'm sorry. Senior architect, the position you came here for. It's yours." He was studying her now with an expression she couldn't quite read. "On one condition, which is, you accept that everything I just said was idiotic, and you agree to help me figure out why this company feels like a mausoleum." Maya stood in the doorway, her mind performing complex calculations. This was the promotion she'd wanted for 3 years. This was the bump in salary, the title, the recognition. But it came with James Whitmore attached to it, and James Whitmore had just made one of the most inappropriate comments she'd ever heard in a professional setting. "That comment was inappropriate," she said finally. "It was," James agreed. "I apologize." "It was also sexist and potentially HR violating." "It was," he repeated. "I'm sorry." "And yet you're still offering me the job?" "Yes." "Why?" James leaned back in his chair again. "Because despite that ridiculous exchange, you walked into this interview prepared. You've got impressive credentials, and you clearly have enough spine to call me out instead of pretending that comment was acceptable. That's rare. That's what I need right now." Maya considered this. The bun on the back of her head suddenly felt less like professionalism and more like a wall she'd been building for a decade. But that wasn't his business to point out. "I need to think about this." "You have until 5 o'clock today," James said. He picked up his phone, effectively dismissing her. "There's a signing bonus of $30,000, a 10% increase in base salary, and your own office on this floor." Maya walked toward the door, then paused. Without looking back, she said, "For what it's worth, I do have fun. I rebuild vintage motorcycles on weekends." She left before she could see his expression change. By 4:52 p.m., Maya had called James's office and accepted the position. She told herself it was the money. She told herself it was the office. She told herself it had nothing to do with the fact that James Whitmore was the most infuriating human she'd ever met, and she was apparently the kind of person who wanted to prove infuriating humans wrong. Her first day at Whitmore & Associates was a Monday. She arrived at 7:45 a.m., which was earlier than most people, but somehow still later than she felt comfortable with. Her hair was down. She'd spent 40 minutes with a flat iron that morning, and her shoulders were tense from the unfamiliar weight of it. James was already in his office when she arrived. He looked like he hadn't left. "First day," he said when she appeared in his doorway, with a coffee in each hand. She'd brought him one without really thinking about it. "How are you feeling?" "Like I made a terrible mistake," Maya said. James smiled. It was a genuine smile, and it made him look like a completely different person. Softer, younger, less like a villain in a corporate thriller. "Give it a week." She didn't know it yet, but that week would change everything. The mistake she was referring to wasn't accepting the job. It was whatever was about to happen between her and the man behind the obsidian desk, the man who'd insulted her and hired her in the same breath, who clearly had no idea what he was doing, and who was somehow about to become the most important person in her carefully organized life. But that's getting ahead of the story. Maya's first week at Whitmore & Associates was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Her office, a sleek corner space with actual windows, became her fortress. She'd organized it with military precision. A filing system color-coded by project phase, a desk calendar with time blocks allocated down to 15-minute increments, and a small, succulent plant that she watered every Wednesday at precisely 2 p.m. On Thursday morning, James appeared in her doorway without knocking. "I need your help with something," he said. Maya looked up from her computer screen, where she'd been reviewing preliminary sketches for a new residential complex in Brooklyn. With what? A complete disaster. He led her through the office corridors to a large conference room, where roughly 20 people sat around a massive oak table, all looking like they'd been told to expect a root canal. On the walls were photographs of the firm's latest project, a mixed-use development in Tribeca that was supposed to redefine urban living in Manhattan. The architectural renderings were beautiful in an almost clinical way, all sharp angles and polished surfaces, utterly devoid of warmth. "This is the Tribeca Collective," James announced, gesturing to the renderings. 62 stories. 230 luxury apartments, 40,000 square feet of retail, a rooftop garden that no one will ever use. "We're 2 months from breaking ground." "What's the problem?" Maya asked. "We just got the client feedback from their advisory board," James said grimly. He pulled up an email on the projection screen. The subject line read, "Concerns Re-Architectural Vision." Meidua. The email was a devastation. The advisory board found the design uninspired, corporate, and lacking soul. They wanted to see alternative concepts. They wanted options that felt alive and human-centered. They wanted things that, according to the email, didn't look like they were designed by robots. The room fell silent. Everyone was carefully avoiding looking at James. Maya stepped closer to the renderings. She studied them for a long moment, tilting her head, squinting at the angles. "It's a building," she said finally. "Not a building for people. It's a building for the idea of people." "Exactly," James said quietly. "That's the problem." "What do you mean?" asked Derek, one of the senior architects, a man who'd been with the firm for 15 years and clearly resented being told his work was soulless. "I mean, you've designed something that maximizes profit and minimizes inconvenience," Maya said, still studying the renderings. "But there's nothing in it that makes someone want to wake up in one of these apartments and feel happy. There's no unexpected corner, no moment of delight, no reason for someone to choose to live here instead of anywhere else." Derek's face reddened. "Easy to critique, harder to fix." James looked at Maya. "Can you fix it?" "I don't know," Maya said honestly, "but I can try." For the next 6 days, Maya barely left the office. She arrived at 6 a.m. and left well after 9 p.m. Drew usually to find James still at his desk, working through sketches of his own. They didn't plan to spend time together. They simply ended up in the same spaces, orbiting each other in the vast ecosystem of the firm, occasionally colliding in hallways or conference rooms. On Tuesday night around 8 p.m., Maya was in her office when James appeared with 2 containers of Thai food he'd ordered from a place down the street. "You need to eat," he said, setting one on her desk without asking if she wanted it. "I'm in the middle of something," Maya protested, but she was already opening the container. "So was I," James said, pulling up a chair. "But I'm hungry, and I suspect you are too, even if you won't admit it." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle clicking of their keyboards and the ambient noise of the city outside. Maya realized halfway through her pad thai that this was the longest period of time she'd spent with James that didn't involve tension or frustration. It was surprisingly pleasant. "Tell me about the motorcycles," James said suddenly. Maya looked up. "What? You mentioned you rebuild vintage motorcycles. Tell me about that." "Why?" Maya asked suspiciously. "Because I want to know something about you that isn't on your resume or related to architectural drawings," James said. He was eating green curry, and there was a small dab of it on his lower lip. Maya found this detail oddly endearing. "Is that not allowed?" "It's just unexpected from you." "I'm capable of surprise," James said. "So?" Maya set down her fork. "I have a 1972 Honda CB750. I found it in pieces in my grandfather's garage when I was 16. He was a mechanic, the kind who understood machines the way some people understand music. He taught me how to rebuild it. Is it finished? Almost. I'm waiting for a specific carburetor to complete the restoration. It's been that way for about 2 years. James nodded slowly. Why haven't you finished it? Because finishing means it's done, Maya said. And once something's done, you have to figure out what to do with it, so I keep it in pieces. It's safer that way. She heard what she'd said, really heard it, and felt something shift in her chest. James was watching her with an expression that suggested he understood exactly what she meant, and it was more than just about a motorcycle. That's sad, he said finally. It's practical, Maya corrected, but her voice was quieter now. It's both, James said. He stood, taking his empty container with him. For what it's worth, I think you should finish it. Life's too short to leave things in pieces. He left before Maya could respond. By Thursday, Maya had produced a series of radically different sketches for the Tribeca Collective. Instead of one monolithic structure, she'd envisioned it as 3 interconnected towers of varying heights, creating visual rhythm and breaking the skyline into something more organic. The ground level wasn't just retail. It was a series of semi-public spaces that blurred the line between inside and outside, creating pocket gardens and unexpected gathering spots. The rooftop wasn't just a garden. It was a genuine community space with varied elevations, trees, and actual places where humans might want to exist. The sketches weren't perfect. They were rough, almost reckless compared to the firm's usual output. But they had something the original design lacked. They had personality. James stood in her office on Thursday evening, studying the sketches without speaking. Maya sat at her desk, her leg bouncing with anxiety. She'd learned quickly that silence from James didn't necessarily mean disapproval, but it was still terrifying. These are remarkable, he said finally. They're not polished, Maya said. They'd need a ton of refinement, structural analysis, cost evaluation, client approval. I know, James interrupted. But look at them, Maya. Look at what you've done. You've built something that makes people want to exist in it. That's the opposite of what we do here. That's everything we need to be. Maya felt her face flush. It's just a starting point. It's more than that, James said. He turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with professional admiration. It's proof that you were right, that I was right to hire you, that there's something in you that my entire firm seems to have lost. What's that? Maya asked quietly. Belief that buildings should make people happy, James said. Not just shelter them, actually make them happy. He walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Thousands of windows in thousands of buildings, most of them probably designed without any consideration for whether the people inside them were happy. I became an architect because my grandmother took me to see the Guggenheim when I was 8 years old, he said. I remember walking inside and feeling like I was flying. The building was alive. It made me feel alive. Somewhere along the way, I forgot why I wanted to do this. And now? Maya asked. Now I'm remembering, James said. He didn't turn around, but she could see his face reflected in the dark window glass, thoughtful, vulnerable, younger than he usually allowed himself to appear. Thanks to you. There was a charge in the air between them, a sudden electrical awareness that had nothing to do with architecture or professional boundaries. Maya felt her throat go dry. I should go home, she said finally. Get some sleep. We have the client presentation in the morning. Right, James said. He still wasn't turning around. Of course. But neither of them moved for another long moment. The next morning, the presentation was a triumph. The advisory board loved the redesigned concept. They approved moving forward with Maya's vision, allocating an additional budget to make the pocket gardens and semi-public spaces as ambitious as her sketches suggested. Derek, surprisingly, came up to Maya after the meeting and congratulated her, a genuine compliment that suggested professional respect, even if the jealousy hadn't entirely faded from his eyes. James didn't congratulate her. He simply nodded across the conference room, a small gesture, but his eyes held an intensity that made her stomach flip. That evening, Maya found herself at her usual spot on the rooftop of her building in Brooklyn, a converted loft space with exposed brick and large windows. She sat on the edge, her legs dangling over the street below, and she thought about motorcycles and finished things and the terrifying realization that she might be developing feelings for her new boss, which was officially the worst professional decision her heart could possibly make. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You left your coffee in the conference room. Brought it to your office. It's probably cold by now. Sorry, JW." Maya smiled despite herself. She saved his number and she typed back, "Thanks for thinking of it." The response came almost immediately. "It's what people do for each other." Maya stared at that message for a long time. The Tribeca Collective became the centerpiece of Whitmore & Associates' portfolio almost overnight. Architecture magazines ran spreads on Maya's innovative design. The New York Times published a profile titled "The Woman Rebuilding Manhattan's Soul," which was embarrassing, and also somehow accurate. Within 3 weeks, 3 new clients specifically requested Maya for their projects. James had never looked happier or more terrified. "You're going to leave," he said to Maya one morning, appearing in her doorway before she'd even finished her coffee. It was 6:45 a.m., and he was already disheveled, his tie loosened, his dark hair looking like he'd been running his hands through it all night. "You're going to get offers from better firms, firms with actual prestige." "Good morning to you too," Maya said, setting down her coffee cup carefully. "And I'm not leaving." "You should," James said. He walked to her window and stared out at the city, which was just beginning to lighten with the approaching dawn. "I've been thinking about it. You're too good for this place. You're too good for me to keep contained in one office." "Contained?" Maya felt a spike of irritation. "I'm not a possession, James, and I'm not planning to leave. I like working here. I like the projects. I like—" She stopped herself before she could say, "I like you." "You like what?" James turned back to face her, and there was something raw and exposed in his expression that made her heart skip. "The team," Maya said carefully. "I like the team we've built." James studied her for a long moment, and she could see him wrestling with something internal. Finally he said, "There's a problem with the Tribeca project." The change of subject was so abrupt, it was almost comical, but Maya recognized a deflection when she heard one. "What kind of problem?" "The structural engineer just came back with his report. The configuration you designed for the 3 towers, it's too ambitious for the site's load-bearing capacity. We'd need to either significantly reduce the height or completely redesign the interior support system, which would add an estimated $8 million to the budget." Maya felt her stomach drop. "How did we miss that?" "We didn't miss it. I did," James said quietly. "I should have coordinated with structural engineering before presenting to the client. That's basic project management. I was too eager to impress everyone with your design. I rushed it." "So what do we do?" Maya asked, already standing, already moving into problem-solving mode. "We tell the client we made a mistake," James said. "We either present them with a watered-down version of your concept, or we tell them the budget's increased, or we start over." "None of those are acceptable," Maya said. She was pacing now, her mind already working through possibilities. "There has to be a way to make the original design work within the structural constraints." "There might be," James said. "But you'd need to completely reconceptualize the interior framework. It would take weeks, maybe more." "Then we have weeks," Maya said. She was already opening her laptop, pulling up the structural report. "Get me the engineer's detailed analysis. And get me Derek. We're going to need his expertise on the interior layout." For the next 17 days, the office became a creative war room. Maya worked almost obsessively, refining her designs in collaboration with Derek and the structural engineer. She barely left the office. She showered in the executive bathroom using a change of clothes she kept in her office drawer. She consumed approximately 17,000 cups of coffee. James was there the entire time, watching, supporting, occasionally bringing her food, or quietly clearing her desk of empty containers when she wasn't paying attention. On day 16, at approximately 2 a.m., Maya finally had it. A complete restructuring of the internal support system that maintained her original vision while satisfying all structural requirements. It was elegant in its simplicity, a series of diagonal bracing elements that became a design feature rather than a hidden necessity. The towers could rise exactly as tall as she'd envisioned them, and the load distribution was perfectly balanced. She sat back in her chair and felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. Exhaustion, relief, vindication, all mixed together. "You did it," James said quietly. She hadn't realized he was standing in her doorway. He'd been sitting at his desk, just keeping her company in the pre-dawn darkness. "We did it," Maya corrected. James walked to her desk and looked at her redesigned drawings. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. "Do you know why I hired you?" "Because I called you out during the interview," Maya said. "That was part of it," James admitted. "But mostly I hired you because I met you and I felt something I haven't felt in a very long time. Like someone understood what I was trying to do, even when I didn't understand it myself." Maya's breath caught. "And then," James continued, "over these past few weeks I've watched you pour yourself into this project. I've watched you care about things that have nothing to do with efficiency or deadlines or getting ahead. You care about whether this building will make people happy. And that's—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "That's extraordinary, Maya. You're extraordinary." "James," Maya said softly, "we can't—" "I know," he said quickly. "I know about the professional boundary. I know you work for me. I know this is inappropriate and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I needed to say it. I needed you to know." Maya stood slowly. They were separated by only the width of her desk now, and the air between them felt thick with all the tension that had been building since the moment she'd walked into his office and told him off for his ridiculous comments about her hair. "If I stand up and walk around this desk," she said carefully, "what happens?" "Probably something we'll both regret professionally," James said. "But I don't think either of us will regret it personally." "That's not a good enough reason," Maya said, but her heart was racing and she was already moving. "No," James agreed. "It's not." She walked around the desk. He didn't move. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to smell the coffee and exhaustion and something distinctly him that made her dizzy. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "The worst," James agreed. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently pulled the elastic band from her hair. Her dark strands fell around her shoulders in waves, and he ran his fingers through them carefully, like he was touching something fragile and infinitely precious. "But I'm done pretending I don't want this." He kissed her then, and it tasted like 2 a.m. and unfinished projects, and the electric moment when you realize that something you've been running from has caught up with you. When they broke apart, Maya was shaking. "This is going to be complicated," she said. "Extremely," James agreed. "People are going to notice." "Definitely. I might hate you in a week." "Possible," James acknowledged. He was still holding her hair gently in his fingers. "But I don't think so." The next morning, they did not tell anyone. They showed the redesigned Tribeca Collective to the client, who approved it immediately. The response from the architecture community was even more enthusiastic than before. Now there was not just beauty in the design, but ingenuity. Maya's solution to the structural challenge was published in 3 architectural journals. She was interviewed by a prestigious design podcast. An investment firm in San Francisco sent her an email asking if she'd consider relocating to lead their new creative division. She deleted it without responding. Instead, she and James navigated an increasingly complicated double life. At work, They maintained professional distance, cool, polite, occasionally collaborating, but nothing that would raise eyebrows. After work, they fell into something that resembled a relationship, though they never formally defined it as such. They had dinner in small restaurants in neighborhoods where they were unlikely to run into anyone from the office. They took long walks through the city, talking about architecture and dreams and fears. They went to James's apartment, a minimalist penthouse that looked like it had been decorated by someone with no personality, which they slowly filled with books and photographs and evidence of actual life being lived. But they lived in constant tension, aware that their situation was unsustainable. James was Maya's boss. She reported to him. Any relationship between them, if discovered, would immediately create a conflict of interest. HR would have a field day. One or both of them might be forced to leave. The reckoning came on a Thursday evening in late September, almost 2 months after they'd kissed over her redesigned architectural drawings. James and Maya were at his apartment, lying in bed, her head on his chest, his fingers running through her hair in a way that had become familiar and comforting. Outside, the city lights glittered below them, and there was a moment of perfect peace that neither of them wanted to disturb, but James did. "I have to recuse myself from your projects," he said quietly. Maya sat up. "What?" "Oh, I've been thinking about it," James said, sitting up as well. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as anxiety. "This relationship, whatever we're calling it, it creates a conflict of interest. I need to formally recuse myself from evaluating your work. I'm going to recommend you for promotion to associate principal. That means you'll work directly with Derek instead of reporting to me." "No," Maya said immediately. "It's the right thing to do," James said. "Ethically, professionally. It's the cowardly thing to do," Maya countered. "It's what we do when we're afraid that people will know about us." "People should know about us," James said. "But they should know on our terms, not because we've created an ethical disaster." "Then tell them," Maya said. James looked at her like she'd suggested they both spontaneously combust. "Tell them what?" "That the CEO is dating a junior architect he hired specifically to impress his board of directors." "That's not what happened," Maya said. But even as she said it, she wondered if there was truth buried in the accusation. "Isn't it?" James stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city like it held answers. "I hired you because I was desperate. I was desperate to save my company, and I made a judgment call based on a 10-minute interview and a gut feeling. If anyone knew the full story, they'd question every decision I've made regarding your career. They'd wonder if your work is good because you're talented or because the CEO is in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. "You're in love with me?" Maya asked quietly. James turned back, and his expression was a mixture of exhaustion and resignation. "Yes, Maya. I'm completely and utterly in love with you, which is exactly why I need to step back, because my feelings are clouding my judgment, and you deserve for your success to be undeniable." Maya felt tears pricking her eyes. "So what? We just stop? We pretend this didn't happen?" "No," James said. He walked back to the bed and sat on the edge. "We go public. Controlled disclosure, done carefully. We tell HR. We set boundaries. I step back from your direct supervision. And then, when there's no ethical conflict, we figure out if this thing between us is real or if it's just been the intensity of the situation." "I know what it is," Maya said. "Do you?" James asked gently. "Or do you think you do? Maya, you've spent your entire life in controlled environments. You've never been impulsive. You rebuild motorcycles instead of riding them. You wear your hair down now instead of in that armor of a bun. And maybe that's because of me, or maybe it's because you were ready for a change and I just happened to be there." "That's not fair," Maya said, but her voice wavered. "It's not about fair," James said. "It's about making sure we're making this choice because it's what we actually want, not because we got caught up in the moment." The disclosure to HR happened on a Friday morning. James and Maya sat in the office of Patricia Chen, the Human Resources Director, and explained their situation with careful professionalism. They outlined the steps they'd take to separate their working relationship. They provided documentation showing that Maya's promotion had been earned based on merit, not favoritism. They acknowledged that they understood the gravity of the situation and the ethical concerns. Patricia listened with an expression that suggested she'd heard this story before. "Here's what's going to happen," she said finally. "James, you're going to formally recuse yourself from Maya's performance evaluations and project assignments. Derek will become her direct supervisor. We'll document this transition carefully. Maya, you're going to receive your promotion, and your salary increase will be fair market value for the position. I'll make sure of that personally. And you two are not going to display any romantic behavior at work. No lingering glances, no private meetings that aren't documented, nothing that could be misconstrued. Are we clear?" "Completely," James said. "Good," Patricia said. "Because if this relationship doesn't work out and creates a hostile work environment, or if either of you compromises professional standards, I will personally ensure that one or both of you is terminated. Understood?" They both nodded. "One more thing," Patricia said as they stood to leave. "Congratulations on your promotion, Maya. The Tribeca Collective is genuinely beautiful work. You earned it." That evening, James and Maya didn't go to his apartment. They went to a small bar in the Lower East Side, somewhere neutral and public. They sat at a corner table with beers they didn't particularly want and tried to figure out who they were to each other now that the secret was gone. "So," James said, "we're officially complicated." "Spectacularly complicated," Maya agreed. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Maya looked at him, this man who'd hired her impulsively, who'd challenged her, who'd made her want to be better. "No," she said. "Do you?" "Not for a second," James said. He reached across the table and took her hand, right there in public where anyone could see. "I love you, Maya. I'm going to keep loving you, even if this falls apart. I need you to know that." "I love you too," Maya said. The words felt enormous and terrifying and absolutely true. "I'm scared, but I love you." "Being scared is good," James said. "It means you're not hiding behind structure anymore. You're actually living." Maya smiled despite her anxiety. "Speaking of which, I finished my motorcycle." James's eyes widened. "You did?" "The carburetor finally came in last week. I spent the weekend putting everything together. I took it for a ride yesterday afternoon. James, it's perfect. It's terrifying and completely impractical and the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced." "Sounds like someone else I know," James said. "Shut up," Maya said, but she was laughing. She squeezed his hand. "I don't know what happens next. This could blow up spectacularly. We could discover that we have nothing in common outside of a shared crisis." "We could," James agreed. "But we're going to find out. And no matter what, we're going to do it honestly." "Agreed?" "Agreed," Maya said. They sat in that bar, holding hands across a table, and neither of them knew that the real challenges were just beginning. They didn't know about the complications that would come with their professional separation, or the way insecurity would sometimes creep in late at night, or the moments when their different approaches to life would collide spectacularly. But they also didn't know how much stronger they would become together, or how much they would push each other to grow, or how a woman who'd spent her entire life building walls would eventually learn to trust someone enough to let those walls come down completely. That would come later. 3 months into their official relationship, Maya and James discovered something that all couples eventually learn. Loving someone doesn't mean you understand them, and being passionate about the same work doesn't mean you agree on how to do it. The first real crack appeared in late December, on a Tuesday morning when Derek presented a new client project to the design team. The client was a tech billionaire named Marcus Chen, no relation to Maya's would-have-been surname, who wanted to build a corporate headquarters in Brooklyn that would serve as a creative sanctuary for his 250 employees. The budget was unlimited. The timeline was aggressive. The vision was delightfully vague. "We want it to feel alive," Marcus had said in the initial meeting. "Like the building itself is breathing." Derek divided the project among several senior architects, including Maya. She was assigned the Employee Wellness Center, a multi-story complex featuring gymnasium facilities, meditation spaces, nutrition centers, and areas for unstructured creative collaboration. Maya spent 3 weeks on preliminary sketches. She created something extraordinary, a spiraling structure that mimicked the geometry of a nautilus shell, with natural light spiraling through the center, creating spaces that felt both intimate and expansive. She integrated living walls, water features, and areas that encouraged spontaneous interaction. It was beautiful and human-centered, and exactly the kind of work that had made her reputation. James hated it. He told her so on a Friday evening, when he encountered her sketches during a late-night office stint. He still spent considerable time in the office, even though he was technically no longer supervising her work. He'd come in to review overall firm strategy and found Maya alone in the conference room, studying her wellness center renderings on the large projection screen. "It's too organic," he said without preamble. Maya turned, startled. "What?" "The design," James said, stepping closer to the screen. "It's beautiful, but it's too organic. It doesn't feel like a corporate space. It feels like someone's fantasy of what a corporate space should be." "That was the point," Maya said carefully. She'd learned that James's criticism, while sometimes harsh, usually came from a place of genuine concern. But this felt different. This felt personal. The client asked for something that felt alive. This accomplishes that. "It accomplishes the client's fantasy," James said, "not their actual need. Do you know what happens when you bring 250 stressed tech workers into a space designed to feel like the inside of a seashell? They don't have profound epiphanies about creativity and collaboration. They feel disoriented. They feel like management is trying to trick them into being productive through spatial manipulation." "That's cynical," Maya said quietly. "It's realistic," James countered. He was pacing now, his hands gesturing as he spoke. "Look, I understand what you're trying to do. I understand the philosophy. But philosophy doesn't build functional workspaces. Structure does. Clarity does. You've created something that's all atmosphere and no substance." Maya felt her chest tighten. She'd been working on these designs for 3 weeks. She'd consulted research on biophilic design, occupational psychology, and spatial ergonomics. And James, the man she loved, the man who'd hired her because he wanted her to help rebuild the firm's soul, was dismissing it as decorative fantasy. "Then what would you do?" she asked, hearing the defensive edge in her own voice. "I don't know yet," James said, "but I know this isn't it." He left before Maya could respond. She stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by her renderings, and felt something shift in the foundations of their relationship. Over the next week, they didn't discuss it. They maintained professional distance at work, which was easy since James was no longer formally involved in her projects. But at night, when they were alone, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Maya threw herself into redesigning the wellness center. She stripped away the organic elements, created a more geometric structure, incorporated more minimalist aesthetics. She created something that was technically excellent, but also completely devoid of the spark that had made her reputation. It was a building designed by someone who was trying to please someone else instead of following her instincts. When she presented the new version to Derek, he was confused. "This is fine," he said carefully, "but it's not as strong as your initial concept." "What happened?" "I reconsidered the client needs," Maya said, which was technically true and also a lie. "Maya," Derek said, leaning back in his chair, "I've worked with you for 4 months now. This isn't you. This is someone trying to be someone else." "What's going on?" she almost told him. She almost said that James had criticized her work and she'd lost confidence in her own instincts. But that would be admitting that her professional judgment was being influenced by her personal relationship, which was exactly the kind of conflict that Patricia Chen had warned them about. "I'm just being more pragmatic," Maya said, "considering real-world constraints. The real-world constraint is that the client loved your original concept," Derek said. "I showed Marcus your initial sketches as a reference for what we might be aiming for. He called them exactly what I imagined. So unless something fundamental changed about the project scope, I'm going to recommend we go back to your original design." Maya felt her stomach twist. "Can you give me a few days to think about it?" That evening, she confronted James in his apartment. She'd let herself in with the key he'd given her months ago, finding him in his home office, working on something on his laptop. She stood in the doorway and waited for him to notice her. When he did, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made her heart hurt, because she was about to destroy the peace between them. "Your wellness center design is being presented to the client next week," she said without preamble. "Derek wants to go with my original concept. The one you said was all fantasy and no substance." James closed his laptop slowly. "Okay, that's it? Just okay? What would you like me to say?" James asked. He stood and walked toward her, but she held up a hand, and he stopped. "I want you to say why you really didn't like it," Maya said, "because I don't think it's about the design being too organic. I think it's something else." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to his window and looked out at the city. That gesture, she'd learned, meant he was gathering his thoughts or his courage, or both. "When I first saw your sketches," he said finally, "I saw everything I wanted the firm to become, everything I wanted us to become. And it terrified me." "Why?" Maya asked. "Because if you're that talented, and you are, then you don't need me," James said. He was still looking out the window. "You don't need Whitmore and Associates. You could go anywhere. You could do anything. And if you stay, I'll always wonder if it's because you want to, or because you feel obligated, or because you're afraid to take a risk." Maya felt something shift in her understanding of him. "Is that what this is about? You're afraid I'm going to leave?" "I'm afraid I'm going to wake up one day and realize I've held you back," James said. He turned to face her, and she could see the vulnerability in his expression. "You had this moment of brilliance with your design, and I was jealous. I was jealous that you'd created something so perfect and so uniquely you, and I was worried that if I acknowledged how good it was, you'd realize you didn't need me." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "I know," James said. "I'm aware of how stupid it is. I'm working on it." "No," Maya said. She walked toward him and took his face in her hands. "It's stupid because it operates from a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are. I'm not staying with you because I need you professionally or because I'm afraid to take risks. I'm staying because I love you. I'm staying because you make me want to be braver and more honest and more myself. I'm staying because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." James pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for criticizing your work. I'm sorry for letting my insecurity drive my opinion." "The design is going forward," Maya said. "The original design. And you're going to tell Derek that you think it's brilliant because it is." "It is," James agreed. "It's extraordinary. And it's mine," Maya said. "It's entirely mine. And you're going to let me own that." "I will," James promised. He pulled back enough to look at her. "I'm going to try really hard to let you be brilliant without it scaring me. And I'm going to try not to make all my decisions based on what you think," Maya said, "because I realized this week that I was designing for you instead of designing for the client or myself, and that's not okay." "No," James agreed. "It's not." They stood there in his apartment, holding each other, and Maya realized something crucial. They weren't done finding their balance. They weren't done learning how to love each other without losing themselves. This was just the beginning of that process, the messy, complicated, essential work of building something real with another person. The Wellness Center design was presented to Marcus Chen in mid-January. He loved it immediately. The spiraling Nautilus structure, the organic elements, the emphasis on biophilic design, all of it resonated with his vision for a space where creativity could flourish. "This is it," Marcus said, walking through Maya's renderings on the projection screen. "This is exactly what I imagined. This is beautiful." Derek congratulated Maya afterward. James sent her a text message. "I'm proud of you. Not because I'm in love with you, but because you're genuinely brilliant. Never forget the difference." Maya kept that message. She read it on difficult days when her confidence wavered. But even as the Wellness Center project moved forward into construction documentation and the firm celebrated the successful pitch, new tensions emerged. Not between her and James, but within their professional relationship to each other. The separation of their working relationship, which had seemed like a clean solution to ethical concerns, proved more complicated in practice. Derek, while competent, didn't challenge Maya the way James did. She missed his intellectual rigor, his willingness to push back, his ability to see problems she couldn't see herself. More troubling was what happened at firm-wide meetings. James, following Patricia Chen's protocols, maintained professional distance from Maya. He didn't seek out her opinion. He didn't collaborate with her on strategic decisions. He treated her like every other architect in the firm, politely, fairly but distantly. It was, technically, exactly what Patricia had asked for. But it meant that their professional and personal lives were completely separated, and living in two separate worlds with the same person was exhausting. "I miss working with you," Maya said one evening. They were in James's apartment again, on his couch, her head on his shoulder, the city glittering beyond the windows. It was February now, and snow was threatening in the forecast. "I miss it too," James said quietly. "Then why don't we do something about it?" "Because Patricia Chen made it very clear what would happen if we compromised professional standards." "I'm not talking about compromising standards," Maya said. She sat up to face him. "I'm talking about finding a way to work together that honors both our personal and professional relationship. We're adults. We're in love. We should be able to collaborate." "Should and can are different things," James said. "Right now, any collaboration between us creates the appearance of favoritism. If I praise your work too much, people wonder if it's professional opinion or personal bias. If I criticize your work, people wonder if it's professional feedback or relationship tension." "So we're just supposed to pretend we don't have a professional relationship?" Maya asked. "Pretend we can't talk about work together?" "No," James said. "We just have to be careful. We have to be transparent. We have to document everything. We have to make sure that every decision I make about your career can be justified independently of our relationship." "That sounds exhausting," Maya said. "It is," James agreed, "but it's the price of doing this responsibly." Maya wanted to argue that love and responsibility were supposed to coexist naturally, not in opposition to each other. But she was beginning to learn that real relationships required compromises that weren't always comfortable or intuitive. Sometimes you had to accept constraint to maintain integrity. Still, the constraints were wearing on her. In late February, an opportunity emerged that would test everything they'd been trying to build. A major architectural firm in Los Angeles, Foster & Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in the country, reached out to Maya directly. They'd seen her work on the Tribeca Collective and the Wellness Center project. They wanted to hire her as a senior architect, leading their new innovation division. The salary was 40% higher than what she was currently making. The projects would be cutting edge. The opportunity was, objectively, extraordinary. She had 2 weeks to decide. Maya didn't tell James immediately. She sat with the offer for 3 days, reading and rereading the email, imagining what her life would look like on the West Coast. She imagined working on projects without the complicated weight of a relationship with her boss, not because she wanted to leave James, but because she wondered what it would feel like to be separate from him. to build a professional identity that was entirely her own. On the fourth day, she told him. She did it carefully, choosing a neutral time and place. His apartment on a Saturday afternoon, neither of them in work mode. She showed him the email and watched his face change as he read it. When he finished, he was quiet for a very long time. "You're going to take it," he said finally. "I don't know," Maya said. "That's why I'm telling you. I want to talk about it first." "There's nothing to talk about," James said. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the pain beneath it. "This is an incredible opportunity. You'd be stupid not to take it." "I'd also be abandoning you," Maya said. "Abandoning us." "No," James said. He stood and walked to the window. That gesture again, the thing he did when he was struggling. "You'd be choosing yourself. You'd be choosing your career over a relationship that's already complicated and probably destined to fail anyway." Maya felt like he'd slapped her. "Is that what you think? That we're destined to fail?" "I think," James said slowly, "that I've been terrified since day one, that I hired you for the wrong reasons, that my judgment about you was clouded from the start. And I think part of me has been waiting for this moment, the moment when you'd realize that you're too talented to be tied to me and this firm." "That's not," Maya started. "And maybe I'm right to be terrified," James continued. "Maybe the healthiest thing for you would be to take this job, build your reputation completely independently. Prove that your success isn't tied to me or Whitmore and Associates or our relationship." "James," Maya said quietly, "I don't want to leave." He turned to look at her, and she could see the conflict in his expression, the part of him that loved her warring with the part of him that was terrified of holding her back. "Then what do you want?" he asked. "I want to talk to Patricia Chen," Maya said. "I want to see if there's a way for us to collaborate professionally without it being inappropriate. I want to ask if we can find a structure that doesn't require us to pretend we don't have a professional relationship. And if the answer is no, then I want to decide whether to take the foster job or stay here with full knowledge of what that means." "And what does it mean?" James asked. "It means choosing you," Maya said, "consciously and deliberately. But I'm not ready to make that choice without exploring other options first. I love you, James, but I love architecture too, and I need to know that I'm not sacrificing one for the other." James nodded slowly. "Okay, let's talk to Patricia." The meeting with Patricia Chen happened on a Monday morning in her office. Maya and James presented a proposal. They wanted to establish a formal, collaborative structure where James and Maya could work together on select projects, with transparent documentation of all decisions and regular check-ins with HR to ensure no conflicts of interest were emerging. Patricia listened carefully, asked detailed questions, and then delivered her verdict. "No, no," Maya asked. "Not yet," Patricia clarified. "Your relationship is too new. The firm's protocols around romantic relationships require a minimum of 1 year of separation before collaborative structures can be reconsidered. You're at 4 months. Come back to me in 8 months and we'll re-evaluate." It was firm but not unreasonable. James and Maya left the office without speaking. They didn't speak in the elevator. They didn't speak in the lobby. It wasn't until they were outside on the street, with the February wind whipping around them, that James turned to her. "You should take the foster job," he said. "No," Maya said. "Listen." "No," she repeated. "I'm not leaving. I'm staying here. I'm staying with you. I'm going to tell Foster and Associates that I'm not interested." "Maya, I'm staying," she said firmly. She took his hand. "I'm staying because I choose to, not because I feel obligated, not because I'm afraid, because I love you, and I want to build something with you. And in 8 months, when Patricia gives us permission to collaborate, we're going to build something remarkable together." James looked at her like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Are you sure?" "Completely," Maya said. "I've spent my entire life playing it safe, building walls, controlling every variable. For once, I'm going to trust that the important things are worth the risk." She called Foster and Associates that evening and politely declined their offer. It was, by any objective measure, a terrible professional decision. It was also the most honest choice she'd ever made. Spring arrived in New York with the kind of aggressive beauty that only the city could muster. Cherry blossoms exploding in Central Park, the smell of pretzels and possibility drifting through the streets, everyone suddenly convinced that their lives were about to change. For Maya and James, spring brought something unexpected: peace. The 8 months until they could formally collaborate seemed simultaneously infinite and manageable. They'd made their choice to stay together, and that choice seemed to settle something in both of them. They stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. They stopped bracing for disaster. They simply existed together, and most days, that was enough. Maya threw herself into the Wellness Center project, which had moved into construction documentation. The Marcus Chen project was becoming the most visible in the firm's portfolio. Architecture publications had started calling it the building that changed everything, the moment when corporate architecture stopped being purely utilitarian and started being genuinely humane. Maya's reputation, independent of James, was solidifying in real time. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. In April, they went to a wedding together, the first time they appeared as a couple at a professional event. It was the wedding of one of Derek's friends, someone removed enough from the firm that it wouldn't create awkwardness. Maya wore a navy dress that was elegant and understated. James wore a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. They danced to terrible pop songs and ate too much cake, and when they thought no one was looking, held hands under the table like teenagers. In May, James took her to the Guggenheim. "I wanted to come back," he said, as they walked through the rotunda, the spiral of white space rising above them. "I wanted to come back with you, to remember why I started doing this." They spiraled upward through the museum, and James told her about being 8 years old, about his grandmother taking him by the hand and changing his entire life with a building. He told her about the moment he decided he wanted to design spaces where people could feel the way he'd felt in that moment, small and vast simultaneously, connected to something larger than themselves. "You did that," Maya said. She was standing in front of one of the paintings, but she was really talking about him. "With the Tribeca Collective, with how you've built this firm. You've created spaces where people can feel that." "We've created spaces," James corrected. "You and me. That's what I want. I want to build things with you." Maya turned to look at him. They were surrounded by tourists and art students and people who had no idea that this man had the capacity to change the architectural landscape of a city. "In 8 months, she said. "We get to start." "I know," James said, "and I'm going to try very hard not to be impatient about it." June brought the first real complication. James's mother called one evening. She never called. Their relationship was cordial but distant, the kind of dynamic that sometimes happened when both people were emotionally unavailable. His mother lived in Connecticut, in a house that had been in the Whitmore family for 3 generations. She spent most of her time on charitable boards and had opinions about everything, delivered with the kind of certainty that suggested she'd never once questioned her own judgment. "I'd like to meet your girlfriend," she said without preamble. James had the phone on speaker in his apartment, and Maya watched his face go carefully blank, the expression he used when dealing with situations he couldn't control. "How did you know about Maya?" he asked. "Derek mentioned it," his mother said. "He said she's an architect at your firm and that you're quite taken with her. I'd like to meet her." She's more than my girlfriend, Mother," James said carefully. "She's my colleague. She's brilliant. She's—" "Wonderful," his mother interrupted. "All the more reason I should meet her. I'm hosting a dinner party on the 22nd of June. It's a small gathering, just some close friends and family. I'd like you both to come." James looked at Maya with an expression that clearly communicated. "Help me." "We'd be delighted," Maya heard herself say. After he hung up, James groaned. "You have no idea what you've just agreed to. My mother is—" "Your mother," Maya finished. Yes, that's generally how this works when you're in a serious relationship with someone. You eventually meet their mother. My mother is a woman who believes that social climbing is an Olympic sport, James said. She's going to interrogate you about your family background and your educational pedigree and whether your parents are connected. She's going to find something to criticize about you, and she's going to do it with a smile. Then I guess I'll just have to be charming, Maya said. That's not how it works with my mother, James said. Charm doesn't matter. She doesn't respond to charm. She responds to, I don't know what she responds to. Perfection, maybe. Deference. Well, I'm charming and competent, Maya said. That'll have to be enough. The dinner party was held in a house that looked like it had been decorated by someone who believed that comfort was a sign of moral weakness. Everything was expensive and nothing was warm. The guests were the kind of people who existed in James's world. Old money, older connections, the kind of people who'd known each other since birth and used that knowledge as a weapon. James's mother, Eleanor, was an elegant woman in her early 60s, with silver hair, arranged in a way that suggested she spent approximately 3 hours per week maintaining it. She embraced James with the kind of distance that suggested genuine affection, despite significant emotional barriers. Then she turned to Maya with a smile that could have cut glass. Maya, she said, taking her hand briefly. No kissing, no warmth, just the acknowledgement of contact. James has told us so little about you. How delightful. You must tell us everything. Dinner was served in a dining room where the table was long enough to require microphones, and the silverware had more pieces than Maya knew what to do with. She made the strategic choice to watch Eleanor during the first course and simply mirror her choices. Your family is from where? Eleanor asked as she cut her salad into precise pieces. My father is from San Francisco originally, Maya said, but he met my mother in New York and they've lived in Brooklyn for the past 20 years. My mother's family is from the Midwest. The Midwest, Eleanor repeated, as though Maya had just mentioned being raised by wolves. How authentic. And what do your parents do? My father's a mechanical engineer, Maya said. My mother was a teacher before she retired. High school mathematics. How wonderful, Eleanor said, in a tone that suggested it was decidedly not wonderful. She turned to James. You never mentioned that your girlfriend's mother was an educator. Didn't I? James said mildly. He was watching this interaction with an expression of barely concealed amusement. I must have assumed it wasn't relevant. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything is relevant, darling. Context matters. But as the evening progressed, something unexpected happened. Eleanor, it turned out, had opinions about architecture. Strong opinions. She'd studied art history in college and had developed views about the evolution of design that were actually quite sophisticated. When the conversation turned to urban development and the future of New York architecture, Maya found herself genuinely engaged with Eleanor in a debate about the merits of preservation versus innovation. You're arguing that we should preserve the old buildings, Eleanor said, but surely that prevents the city from evolving. I'm not arguing for complete preservation, Maya said carefully. She was on her second glass of wine, which was loosening her usually tight grip on professional diplomacy. I'm arguing that we should preserve the buildings that give a city character, and we should build new things that respect that character instead of trying to dominate it. The best cities are layered. They tell multiple stories at once. Like a palimpsest, Eleanor said. Exactly, Maya said. She felt James's foot gently touch hers under the table, a gesture of solidarity or surprise or both. Eleanor set down her fork and studied Maya with new interest. You're not what I expected. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Maya asked. It was an observation, Eleanor said, but there was something warmer in her expression now. James tends to date women who are decorative, charming but ultimately inconsequential. You're neither of those things. Thank you, Maya said, deciding to take it as a compliment. Later, as they were leaving, Eleanor pulled Maya aside while James was retrieving her coat. "He loves you," Eleanor said without preamble. "Yes," Maya said, not bothering to deny it. "He's never loved anyone before," Eleanor continued, "in his entire life. I didn't think he was capable of it. He's too much like me, too guarded, too afraid of losing control. So if you hurt him, I'm going to make your life considerably difficult. I have resources and opinions, and absolutely no ethical constraints about using either. Understood?" "Completely," Maya said. She met Eleanor's eyes directly. "And for what it's worth, I'm not planning to hurt him. I love him too." Eleanor nodded once, as if filing this information away. Then she smiled. A real smile, warmer than anything she'd offered during dinner. "Good. Then I suppose I'll have to stop trying to intimidate you." The incident with Eleanor triggered something in James that Maya hadn't anticipated. In the weeks following the dinner party, he became withdrawn in subtle ways. He'd still come home to her, still hold her at night, still kiss her in the morning. But there was a distance in him, a preoccupation that had nothing to do with work. Finally, in mid-July, as they were sitting on the roof of her Brooklyn apartment watching the sunset, Maya confronted him. "Something's wrong," she said. "And before you tell me nothing's wrong, remember that I've spent enough time with you now to know when you're lying." James was quiet for a long moment. He was holding a beer that he wasn't drinking, just rotating the bottle in his hands in a way that suggested he was trying to organize his thoughts. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked finally. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you ever think about what happens after 8 months? When we can finally work together? What happens when we've been together for a year, 2 years? What happens if we want to get married?" "Are you asking me to marry you?" Maya asked carefully. "No," James said, "but I'm asking if you could imagine it, because I've realized something in the past few weeks and it's terrifying me." "Oh, what have you realized?" "That I'm going to want that," James said. He finally looked at her. "I'm going to want to marry you, and I'm scared that if I do, I'm going to hold you back. I'm going to be the thing that keeps you from becoming everything you're capable of being." Maya felt her chest tighten. "Is that what Eleanor said to you?" "No," James said. "Eleanor said I should marry you quickly before I screw it up, but it made me think about what marriage would actually mean. It would mean being tied to this city, to this firm, to me. And you're so talented, Maya. You could go anywhere. You could do anything, and I'm afraid I'm going to convince you to stay because I'm selfish." "You're not selfish," Maya said quietly, "but you are afraid. And that's different." "Is it?" James asked. "Yes," Maya said. She took the beer bottle from his hands and set it aside. Then she took both his hands in hers. "You're afraid that loving me means limiting me. But love doesn't work that way. Love is where limitation and freedom become the same thing. I could work anywhere. I could chase opportunities anywhere. But I choose to work with you because you make me better. You challenge me. You push me to be braver. That's not limitation. That's the opposite." "But what if," James started, "what if you become my whole world and I wake up one day resenting you for it?" Maya finished. "Yeah, that's possible. That's possible in any relationship. But it's also possible that we become each other's whole world, and we wake up every day grateful for it. You don't get to choose the positive outcomes without risking the negative ones. That's not how life works." James pulled her close. "I'm going to propose to you someday," he said, "and I'm going to be terrified the entire time that it's a mistake." "That's fine," Maya said. "As long as you propose, anyway." In August, the Wellness Center project broke ground. It was a Tuesday morning, and despite the summer heat, a crowd gathered at the site in Brooklyn. Maya, James, Derek, representatives from Marcus Chen's company, and a handful of press photographers who'd been invited because the project had enough cultural cash to warrant documentation. Marcus gave a speech about the future of corporate architecture. Derek gave a speech about innovative design. Maya stood to the side, watching the ceremonial groundbreaking, and felt a sense of profound gratitude that her life had led her to this moment. James found her afterward, when the crowd had dispersed and the real work was about to begin. "You did this," he said quietly. "We did this," Maya corrected. "If you hadn't pushed back on my first design, I wouldn't have had to innovate. If you hadn't taken that risk on me, I wouldn't be here." "We did this," James agreed. He took her hand, right there in front of the remaining photographers and firm employees. "And we're going to do so much more." In September, with only a month remaining until they could formally collaborate, something shifted between them. The tension that had always characterized their relationship, the careful distance maintained at work, the compartmentalization of professional and personal, began to feel less like protection and more like prison. One evening, James came home to find Maya sitting in his apartment, surrounded by architectural drawings spread across his coffee table. "I've been thinking about our first collaborative project," she said, "after Patricia gives us permission. And I have an idea." "Tell me," James said, sitting down beside her. "I want to design a community center," Maya said. "Somewhere in Brooklyn, probably a neighborhood that's been overlooked by the development boom. I want it to serve low-income families and immigrants and people who don't have access to the kinds of spaces that corporations are building. I want it to be beautiful and functional and genuinely welcoming to people who've been told repeatedly that nice things aren't for them." "That's beautiful," James said. "It would be pro bono," Maya said. "The firm wouldn't make money on it. It would be a passion project." "Then we'll do it as a passion project," James said. "We'll fund it partially through the firm, partially through grants, partially through our own money if we have to. We'll make it happen." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "You're not going to try to make it profitable? You're not going to try to optimize it?" "No," James said. "I'm going to trust your vision completely, because you've earned that trust 1,000 times over." They spent that evening designing. Not the community center itself, that would come later with proper research and community input, but the framework of how they would approach it. They talked about what mattered most. They challenged each other's assumptions. They laughed when ideas didn't work and celebrated when they did. And Maya realized as the night deepened and the city grew quieter beyond the windows that this was what she'd been waiting for. Not the romance, though that was wonderful, not the professional success, though that mattered, but this: collaboration with someone who understood her completely, who pushed her to be better, who believed that beautiful things were worth building even when they weren't profitable. She'd spent her entire life building walls and structures to protect herself from risk. But the greatest building of her life, she was discovering, was the one she was constructing with James. A structure of trust and vulnerability and the willingness to be known completely by another person. It wasn't finished yet. They were still in the early phases of construction, but for the first time, Maya wasn't afraid of what would happen when they completed it. October arrived in New York with the kind of golden light that made the city look like it had been designed specifically to break your heart. The leaves in Central Park turned colors that seemed impossible, reds and oranges, and burnt siennas that looked like someone had painted them by hand. The air carried the promise of endings and beginnings simultaneously. Exactly 1 year and 1 day after Maya had accepted the promotion at Whitmore and Associates, Patricia Chen sent her an email marked urgent. "My office, Monday morning, 9 a.m. You and James both." Neither of them slept Sunday night. "What if she's firing us?" Maya asked at 3 a.m., lying in the darkness of James's apartment. "She's not firing us," James said, but he didn't sound entirely convinced. "What if the firm is being investigated for something? What if there's been a breach of protocol?" "Maya," James said gently, "you need to stop catastrophizing. Patricia said we could revisit the collaborative arrangement after 1 year. This is probably just that conversation." But even James seemed nervous. Patricia's office was precisely as they remembered it. Efficient, organized, decorated with the kind of minimalism that suggested she had no patience for clutter, either physical or emotional. She gestured for them to sit, and then studied them both with an expression that gave nothing away. "How long have you two been together?" she asked. 1 year tomorrow, James said. And how would you characterize the professional relationship during that time? Appropriate, Maya said. We've maintained clear boundaries. We've also learned that maintaining those boundaries is making us less effective as architects, James added. I believe it's limiting us creatively. Patricia nodded slowly. She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out documentation. Performance reviews, project assessments, client feedback. Your work, since you've been separated professionally, has been exceptional. Both of you. Maya, your Wellness Center project has generated more press and professional recognition than anything Whitmore and Associates has done in 5 years. James, your strategic vision has kept the firm innovative and responsive to market changes. Derek tells me you've both mentioned wanting to collaborate. We have, James confirmed. Then here's what I'm prepared to offer, Patricia said. She leaned back in her chair, her expression remaining neutral. You can collaborate on a trial basis. One project approximately 6 to 9 months in duration. During that time, I'll be implementing additional oversight. Monthly check-ins with you both, external review of all major decisions, documentation of everything. If at any point I feel that the personal relationship is compromising professional judgment, we stop the collaboration immediately. Understood? Completely, Maya said. Good, Patricia continued, because if this works, if you can maintain professional standards while leveraging your personal connection, I want to make you both partners in the firm. Not co-owners, not yet, but partners with equity stake and decision-making authority. That means you'd be responsible not just for your own work, but for the entire firm's direction. You'd have to learn to navigate the reality that sometimes personal disagreements will have professional consequences, and professional responsibilities will have personal cost. Are you ready for that? James and Maya exchanged glances. There was a question in that look. Are we really doing this? There was also an answer, yes, completely, without reservation. We're ready, James said. Patricia smiled, a genuine smile, not the polite professional mask she usually wore. I thought you might be. You two are the future of this firm. Now go build something remarkable. They chose the Community Center project. The location was a block in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, an area that had been gentrifying slowly, developing enough that property values were rising but not so much that the long-time residents had been completely displaced. There was a public school that served predominantly low-income families, a community garden that operated on donated land, a mosque, a Protestant church, a synagogue, and approximately 2,000 people who deserved access to beautiful public space, but had been systematically denied it. The first month was research. Maya and James, along with Derek and 2 junior architects, conducted community meetings, interviewed residents, learned about the neighborhood's history and needs. They discovered that people wanted gathering spaces for celebrations, places where their children could play safely, areas for arts, programming and education, gardens for food production and beauty. What they didn't want was a monument to charity. They didn't want a building that said, "Look at us, being generous to people in need." They wanted a building that belonged to them, that treated them with dignity, that assumed they had good taste and needed actual aesthetic beauty, not just functional shelter. We need to design this with the community, Maya said during a planning meeting in the second week. Not for them, with them. We need to hire local contractors. We need to prioritize women and people of color in the hiring process. We need to make sure that the economic benefit flows to the people who actually live here. That's going to be logistically complicated, Derek said, and expensive. Then we make it work, James said. He looked at Maya with an expression of such complete confidence that she felt her chest expand. Maya's right. This building is only meaningful if the people who use it had a voice in creating it. What followed was the most collaborative, complicated, frustrating, and beautiful architectural process either of them had ever experienced. They held design workshops in the school gymnasium. They brought in mock-ups and asked people to imagine moving through spaces. They watched children play in proposed playground areas and adjusted designs based on how kids actually used space versus how architects theorized they would. Months passed, winter came and went. The wellness center, meanwhile, was rising beautifully, the spiraling Nautilus structure becoming increasingly visible, the biophilic elements creating something that genuinely looked alive, even in its unfinished state. By February, Maya and James had a design for the community center that bore almost no resemblance to their initial sketches. It was lower to the ground than they'd originally planned, creating a sense of welcome rather than grandeur. The structure incorporated community input in visible ways, literal design elements that had been suggested by residents. There was a rooftop garden where neighborhood kids had requested it to be. There was a stage for performances that a local theater director had helped them design. There were quiet spaces for prayer or contemplation, reflecting the neighborhood's religious diversity. Most importantly, it was genuinely beautiful. It was the kind of building that made you want to spend time in it, that made you feel seen and welcome and valued. Patricia Chen came to a design review in early March. She walked through the renderings slowly, studying every detail, and then she turned to Maya and James with an expression of profound approval. "This is extraordinary," she said. "This is beyond what I expected. This is the kind of work that changes how people think about what architecture can do." "It's what architecture should do," James said quietly. He was looking at Maya as he said it. "It should serve people, not profit, not ego, people." In April, they broke ground on the community center. There was a ceremonial groundbreaking attended by the neighborhood residents who'd contributed to the design, by local officials and press, by the entire Whitmore and Associates team. Maya's parents came from Brooklyn. James's mother came from Connecticut, and she spent most of the ceremony talking to Maya's mother about the importance of community investment, which was unexpected and wonderful. After the official ceremony ended, Maya found herself standing at the edge of the construction site, watching the equipment being moved into place. James came up beside her, and they stood together in companionable silence, watching the beginning of something they'd built together. "I have something for you," James said finally. He reached into his pocket. Maya's heart began racing. This was it. This was the moment. After all the discussions and implications and moments of almost saying it, he was finally going to ask. But instead of a ring box, he pulled out a set of keys. "What are these?" Maya asked, confused. "Keys to a garage in Red Hook," James said. "There's a space there, about 2,000 square feet, climate-controlled, perfect for someone who rebuilds motorcycles." "James," Maya started. "Let me finish," he said. "I know you finished your grandfather's motorcycle. And I know you don't ride it, because finishing means you have to figure out what comes next. So I want to give you a space where you can finish other things, where you can take risks without being afraid, where you can build things just because you want to, not because they need to be profitable or impressive." Maya felt tears beginning to form. "This is not the main thing," James interrupted. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This is the main thing." He opened it, and inside was a ring. Not a diamond, not something traditional. It was a sapphire, deep blue like the evening sky, surrounded by a constellation of smaller stones that had clearly been chosen with careful thought. "It's made from sapphires mined in Montana," James said quietly. "Your grandfather's home state. The design is based on the spiral from the wellness center, the thing you created that changed my life. I had it made by a local craftsperson, a woman from the neighborhood we're building the community center in. Every element connects to our story." James lowered himself onto one knee, right there on the construction site of the community center, surrounded by heavy machinery and dirt, and the physical manifestation of everything they'd built together. "Maya Miller," he said, "I love you. I'm in awe of you. I want to build my entire life with you, not just buildings, but a partnership where we challenge each other and support each other and make the world slightly more beautiful by existing in it." Will you marry me? Maya was crying now, not the graceful tears of romantic comedies, but actual sobbing, tears streaming down her face. Her makeup definitely ruined, and she didn't care at all. Yes, she said. Yes, obviously yes. James stood and pulled her into his arms, and the construction workers around them began to cheer. Someone had been filming on their phone, and that video would later circulate through social media, a beautiful moment of joy and commitment captured authentically, without filter or curation. I love you, Maya whispered into his shoulder. I love you so much. I love you too, James said. Forever. I love you forever. They got married 8 months later, in October, exactly 2 years after Maya had walked into James's office and told him off for his inappropriate comments about her hair. The wedding was small, maybe 100 people, held in the courtyard of a historic building in Brooklyn that they designed together as a wedding gift to themselves. There was no elaborate ceremony, no pretense, just family and friends and colleagues, and the specific magic that comes when people who love you gather to witness a commitment. Maya wore a dress that her mother had helped her pick out, something elegant and simple that let her move freely. James wore a suit that his tailor had made to fit him perfectly. Eleanor sat in the front row and cried, actual tears, which surprised everyone who knew her, and spent most of the reception telling anyone who would listen that James had finally become human because of this woman. The ceremony itself was conducted by a friend of theirs, a lawyer who'd been ordained online specifically for this purpose. There were vows they'd written themselves, full of specific details and inside jokes and promises that acknowledged the reality that love required work and risk. I promise to keep pushing you, James said, his voice steady, to challenge you when you're settling, to believe in you even when you doubt yourself, and to never let you disappear behind walls ever again. I promise to take risks with you, Maya said, to support your dreams even when they're terrifying, to collaborate with you honestly, and to build things together that neither of us could build alone. They exchanged rings that matched the engagement ring, sapphire and Montana stone, and the constellation of smaller gems. And then, when the officiant told him he could kiss her, James pulled her close and kissed her in a way that was both passionate and tender, that suggested all the ways he planned to love her for the rest of their lives. The reception was held in a garden, under lights strung between trees, with food from restaurants owned by people from the neighborhood where they'd built the community center. Derek gave a toast about their professional journey. Eleanor gave a surprisingly heartfelt toast about how watching James become vulnerable enough to love someone had been the greatest gift of her life. Maya's parents gave a toast about how their daughter had finally learned that structure and spontaneity weren't opposites but partners, like a good marriage should be. And then, as the sun set and the lights came alive, Maya and James danced to a song that meant nothing and everything, something soft and beautiful that allowed them to simply hold each other and exist in the moment. "We're married," Maya whispered. "We are," James confirmed. "How does it feel?" "Like the beginning of something," Maya said. "Like all the careful planning and risk-taking was just the foundation, and now we get to build the actual structure." "That's exactly what it is," James said. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'm so proud to be building it with you." 2 years later, the community center opened on a Tuesday in the spring, exactly 3 years after Maya and James had first begun collaborating on it. The building was everything they'd imagined, beautiful and welcoming, and genuinely serving the neighborhood in meaningful ways. The grand opening was attended by hundreds of people, residents who'd contributed to the design, local officials, architecture critics, journalists, and students who were studying the project as a model for community-centered design. Maya stood in the lobby, watching people move through the spaces she and James had created, and felt a profound sense of completion. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, was drawing in one of the quiet spaces, using colored pencils at a small desk beside a window that overlooked the neighborhood. An older man was sitting in the meditation garden, eyes closed, peaceful. A group of teenagers was setting up for a performance on the stage that had been designed partially by them. This was what architecture was supposed to do, not impress, not dominate, serve. James found her there, watching the child draw. He took her hand, and they stood together in the space they'd built. "We did this," he said quietly. "We did," Maya agreed. "What's next?" James asked. Maya thought about the community center they were already designing in another neighborhood. She thought about the innovation division they'd created at the firm, dedicated to projects that didn't necessarily make money, but did change lives. She thought about the partnership that was becoming increasingly visible as they worked together more collaboratively, as their professional reputation became inseparable from their personal commitment to each other. Most of all, she thought about the fact that for the first time in her life, she had no idea what would come next, and she was completely okay with that. "I don't know," she said, "but we'll figure it out together." James smiled, that genuine smile that had first appeared in his office 3 years ago when he'd realized that Maya Miller was going to change his life. "Together," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." They left the community center as evening fell, walking through the neighborhood they'd helped revitalize. Past the community garden where residents grew vegetables and flowers, past the small businesses that were thriving because people had reasons to spend time there now, past the families playing in the parks that had been reimagined to feel welcoming. They walked back to Brooklyn, to the apartment they'd bought together, and climbed the stairs to their rooftop, a tradition that had started years ago and never stopped. They sat overlooking the city, watching the lights come alive, and Maya thought about how much her life had changed since that morning she'd walked into an office and been told to solte o cabello, to let her hair down. She'd done more than that. She'd learned to let go of control. She'd learned that vulnerability could be strength. She'd learned that the most beautiful structures weren't built to shelter you from life, but to help you engage with it more fully. "I'm happy," she said simply. "Good," James said. He took her hand. "That's all I wanted. For you to be happy. For us to be happy together." "I am," Maya said. "We are." And as the city sprawled before them, full of buildings both old and new, all of them created by people trying to build something meaningful, Maya Miller, who'd spent her entire life in careful control, finally understood that the greatest architecture of all was the one you built with another person. The one that required risk and vulnerability and the willingness to be known completely. The one that turned a skeptical CEO and a rigid architect into partners in love and life and the beautiful, complicated, endlessly rewarding work of creating spaces where people could truly be human. The one, in other words, that finally, against all odds and all carefully constructed walls, was home. What did you think of the story? Share your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What was your score? Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to follow all our stories and have fun.